So, Ian, we're back for you first weekly. I want to know as quickly as possibly we can cover this. How do breakthroughs happen for people in a coaching context, and how do you sustain a breakthrough?
So breakthroughs will generally happen, Dave, when you are curious enough to ask yourself the questions that lead to identifying the reason for your discomfort, depending on what level that discomfort is at as well. So some people are mildly uncomfortable and feel that they could be doing better and would like to maybe investigate how they might be able to do better, right up to when some people are at the edge of a cliff and ready to jump off because things are just not working out. So when you're curious enough to investigate what is causing your current state of feeling, that's when the breakthrough happens. Then you're challenged with the type of questions to ask. There's a fabulous doctor called Gabor Mate, and he would suggest that nearly every condition that we're experiencing as an adult is as a result of childhood trauma. So it really is about how willing you are to ask yourself questions about the conditioned behavior you have. So for some people, when they hear things like, I'm going to have to go all the way back, it's like, how willing are you to investigate your story? Stuff that we've spoken about on previous first. Because when you're curious about your story, you then become conscious of how you're carrying it. And as you become conscious of how you're carrying it, you start to see the effect of the story, you start to see the effect of your habits, and it allows you to identify what's getting in your way.
So
it allows you,
so like, it's funny, like breakthrough as a word has a particular kind of connotation. So maybe I'm literally breaking through a wall, or I'm breaking through a barrier or something like that. But it almost sounds to me like that's not necessarily the best way to think about it. It's actually about, maybe I'm standing outside myself and I'm getting really clear on how I've been acting or behaving, or the thing that's getting in my way. So maybe, is that right? Or
fantastic, David. That is exactly it. It's being curious enough to be courageous enough to look at your conditioned behavior. And that gives you clarity then. So standing outside yourself almost gives you the clarity. So, you can use techniques like I speak a lot of the time in metaphor, and I'm using analogies, and I'm describing different things to people to allow them sometimes, and they're going, where in the name of God are you going with this? But it's actually, I'm taking you out of your head. And as you start to compare, as you start to listen to the story about the horse and the dog, you're kind of, okay, so you're out of your own mix. And then you start to see, so, Spencer Johnson wrote a fabulous little book called Who Moved My Cheese? So you look at the parable of Who Moved My Cheese, and you see two little men, hem and haw, and they're deciding on what cheese to eat. You see two little mice, who are the Sniffy and Scurry, and they're all the time running around. And that becomes a metaphor for how we look at life and how we behave in life. So very often when you ask someone to look at something like that, you start to see, oh, so looking at that from the outside, I see parts of me doing things. Okay, so now let's get clarity around that. Whereas when you're stuck in your story, very often you don't see the clarity of your story because you don't even realize you're carrying a story. So the breakthrough comes when you allow yourself the space to question, allow yourself the space to identify the story, allow yourself the courage to really, really look and see, what is it I'm conditioned to do? So I hear people all the time say, I heard a lady today say, and on a program with me, she said, like, I've always said that I'm not good at change. And I'm now listening to some people that I'm sharing this call with, and I see I've done change. And she said, like, I've actually had to do change. And especially over COVID, I've had to take responsibility for things, and I had to own things in a way that I never had to before. So I've just realized I'm not that bad in change. So that was then a conscious breakthrough of, I've been carrying a story that says I'm no good in change. So when someone mentions change, that's what comes up for me. A whole heap of linear thinking goes on that says, oh, well, that won't be for me because I don't do that and I don't like doing this and therefore I won't be in the way of. Now, if I carry a story and says, I've actually done it and I do it quite well. And okay, so I don't go seeking it and it's not my new favorite thing, but actually when it comes up now, I won't be saying to myself, I'm not good at change. I'll be saying, oh, I handle change well when I have to do it.
Yeah.
So the breakthrough for her in this case was just realizing, oh my God, I've been carrying a story about myself that I've just seen now isn't true.
Yeah, yeah. And you've spoken about this before. Yeah, it does, absolutely. And the idea of breakthrough is like, it doesn't have to be the big reveal. It's back to what we were discussing. It's all like breakthrough actually equals reframe.
In one. You've got to break through the pattern to start. You've got to break through the condition of your story to start with, to recognize. You've got to break through the haze of how you're carrying yourself to realize that there is alternative ways. As our friend Peter says, would you be open to an alternative view?
Yeah.
So when you are, and you're curious to see what an alternative view might look like, might sound like, might feel like, that's where the breakthroughs happen.
Yeah. And once they happen, how do you sustain your breakthrough?
It's really simple, but it's not easy. It's about committing to a new way of being then. So if we use the example of my lady today, now, do you really want to now change how you are and how you come to stuff and how stuff comes to you by realizing that you're going to change your story? So to commit to that, you start to reframe the story, you start to repattern the story, and you start to speak it out in a different way, and you start to act it out in a different way. So I hear people say, I'm not a morning person. But that's the story you've been telling yourself.
Yeah.
And because you tell yourself that story, you start to look at the pattern. You say, yeah, I don't like getting up out of bed. And then you start to look and say, well, what time do you get to bed? Well, because I'm not a morning person, I tend to have to get my sleep in the morning. So I go to bed late at night. So it's like midnight or beyond midnight before I get to sleep. But of course, then you're not a morning person because you're human. You need to rest. However, if you change the pattern of that and you went to bed earlier, you'd have to break the pattern, and you'd have to break the pattern of going to bed late. It doesn't happen the first night you go to bed, because if we're using this as an example, the first night I go to bed, I'd be lying in bed kind of wondering where my sleep is, because I'm not used to going to bed this 2 hours earlier.
Yeah.
So now I've got to look and do other things and say, right, well, what do I digest before I go to bed? What exercise do I do? So then I start to look at a whole heap of things and say, well, so I don't take caffeine anymore now after a certain time, and I don't eat after a certain time, and I take more exercise so as I'm tireder in a certain way. And now I start to see, oh, so it means, so if I've carried the story of I'm not a morning person, I now start to see that actually links to a whole heap of activity going back along the chain. So if I want to actually commit to doing something, I've got to start going back to chain to see what's causing this. I can't just, because if I just decide I'm going to go to bed earlier, there's a good chance I'll give that up 3 nights later when I'm saying I'm just bored in bed, going to bed too early. Like I prefer to watch another movie, like I'm lying in bed at 10 o'clock. And then the sleep has gone off me. And what I found now is because I haven't changed anything else in my pattern, I'm now staying awake longer when I go to bed. So when I used to go to bed having watched a movie at 12:30 or 1 a.m., I'd go to sleep. Now I'm going to bed at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. and then awake at 2 a.m. in the morning. Wow, that's stupid.
Yeah.
But you haven't linked the whole pattern. So to get things to change and to embed, the breakthrough is, okay, now I see it the way I've been carrying the story. Now I've got to link and see, well, if I want to embed something, what goes around with that?
Yeah.
But I appreciate now I've jumped from an early morning riser to someone recognizing that they were carrying a story of not being into change. So for her to embed the change piece, it's like, no, I'm open to change now.
Yeah.
And I'm open to carrying a different story and change. So she goes, so the way you embed that for this lady this morning was go look for change now. Go look for things that you have to change in, and recognize that you've actually very recently done very well at doing change. So now you've got to embed that.
Yeah. Yeah. But with both examples, like it's almost a little formula, which is, okay, breakthroughs happen when you reframe yourself or your story or your challenge. You break habits or patterns, and then you rebuild new habits, new thoughts, new attitudes. It seems to me, it doesn't matter if it's
Absolutely.
Whatever, I'm not a morning person, or I don't do change.
And that there's a step that goes before that as well, David. And the step before that is an image of how you want it to be.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's something you're aiming towards. So the thing that allowed you to be courageous in the first place, that to investigate the itch that needs the scratching, is like, I want things to be better. So part of the challenge is to ask, what would that look like, feel like, be like? Yeah. What would the aim be? Because you've got to identify the gap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, you've got to be curious, you then become conscious, then you've got to be courageous enough to identify the gap and do something about going for it.
Yeah.
And then you've got to commit to the change.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take change. So you've got to commit to it.
Yeah.
And I know there's things I've been very good at doing in that, and there's things that I started and I haven't done.
Yeah.
That's what we do as humans. But when you commit to it, having committed to it, you've then got to communicate to yourself and to others what that actually means.
Yeah.
Because as you're doing that, all you're doing then is you're re-embedding. So that's what we do. And then you connect into the future story. You connect into how you want to be with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it also sounds to me, and it's probably useful for people to think about this as well. Breakthroughs are often only the start. Some people think, I made the breakthrough and that was it. It's like, no, you made the breakthrough and now the other work
begins. No, you're off. Like the breakthrough is the first step on your way to going where you want to be at.
Yeah, exactly. So, for people, like if you're attached to, I made the breakthrough and then nothing happens, you're like, well, exactly. So you've got to, it's about kind of understanding a breakthrough happens and then it's followed by all this other stuff that you're talking about.
What are you going to do now? So you've broken through. And breakthrough is you've broken through your pattern. You've identified, you see, that's the way I've been. This is the way I'd like to be. I can see the gap. I can see there's things I could be doing that could help close that gap. Are you willing to do them? So for that lady this morning, identifying that, I'm actually good at change when I have to change. That means nothing if you keep avoiding change forevermore.
Yeah.
Because then you don't get to practice it, you don't get to use it, and when you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
So you're committing, and in the committing, you're taking action.
Yeah.
And action is the big thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like, I mean, without action, everything else, like, it's, as Brian Tracy would say, it's all commentary.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. That's fantastic. Great insight and loads of stuff there around breakthroughs.